Welcome to another deep dive. Music history. It's a huge topic, Rice.
It is.
Luckily, we've got a text here that pretty much covers it all, from prehistoric beats to the music shaping the world today.
Wow.
Get ready for a musical time machine.
I think you'll find it fascinating how music reflects the changes in human society over time. It's like each era has its own soundtrack.
Okay, so let's start at the very beginning.
Okay.
Prehistory, 50,000 to 5,000 BC.
A long time ago.
Obviously, we don't have any recordings from back then, but we do have some clues.
You do?
Thanks to archaeology.
Archaeology?
Yeah. So think cave paintings like the one in Kugel, Spain.
Oh, yeah.
It depicts dancers gathered around a nude male figure,
Sounds like a party.
almost like an ancient rave.
Yeah.
Even though we can't hear the music, these images suggest that music played a crucial role in rituals, perhaps for hunting, worship, or social bonding. It's incredible to think that music has been connecting people for so long, and it's interesting to imagine what their instruments might have sounded like. I mean, we're talking wood, stone, bone, animal hides, very basic stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
It really shows you how creative humans have always been.
Yeah.
And without a standardized tuning system, their music likely focused on rhythm and vocal expression. It must have been a very different soundscape than what we're used to today.
It's like trying to imagine a world without Spotify. So, moving a few thousand years forward, we enter the period of ancient civilizations, from 5000 BC to 476 AD. We see Egypt, Mesopotamia, Greece, Rome, and ancient China all developing their own unique musical styles.
Yeah, and in Egypt, we see the emergence of more sophisticated instruments like harps and oboes. Music was still heavily tied to religious rituals, often performed by priests. Interestingly, in Rome, music found its way into both Christian rites and more lighthearted pagan celebrations.
Oh, so you might hear music in a solemn temple ceremony, and then later at a lively feast.
That's right.
It seems like music was woven into every aspect of Roman life, but what about ancient China? Their musical development seems to have taken a different path.
Absolutely. Ancient China's geographic isolation meant their music developed more independently. We see a blend of secular and mystical music emerging, with unique instruments and scales that differ significantly from Western traditions.
It's amazing how geography and culture influenced music. Speaking of influences, we can't talk about ancient music without mentioning Greece, often considered the birthplace of Western music. And I think most of us know at least a little about their mythology, right?
Right. Well, even the word music comes from the Greek muses, the goddesses of inspiration for art and science. The ancient Greeks considered music essential to drama, philosophy, and even physical education.
Wow.
They believed in the concept of mosikos anadiar, the cultured man, who is well-versed in music, poetry, dance, and even gymnastics.
Wow, so they really did believe in a well-rounded education. I guess that's where the saying, a sound mind and a sound body comes from. But it wasn't all just about philosophy. The Greeks also made significant advancements in music theory.
That's right.
Yeah.
Pythagoras, famous for his mathematical theorem, also developed a system for tuning based on mathematical ratios.
Oh, wow.
This was a huge leap forward, laying the groundwork for the music theory we use today. And think about the instruments they used: the lyre, the cithara, the aloes. These weren't just for entertainment. They were tools for storytelling, philosophical expression, and even religious ceremonies.
It's interesting that many of their instruments, like the lyre, were primarily used for accompaniment. It seems like the focus wasn't on solo virtuosity, but rather on supporting the voice or enhancing a dramatic performance.
Exactly. Now, as we move into the Middle Ages, from 476 to 1450 AD, the soundscape shifts dramatically. The dominant form of music becomes liturgical chant, particularly Gregorian chant, known for its monophonic texture, a single, unaccompanied vocal line.
I've always found Gregorian chant to be incredibly moving, even though it's so simple.
Yeah.
What is it about that single vocal line that creates such a powerful atmosphere?
It's the purity of the human voice, the focus on melody, and the way those chants were designed to resonate in large cathedrals, creating an otherworldly experience. And this era also saw a critical development in music notation.
You're talking about Pope Gregory and his contribution to the standardized musical notation we use today.
Exactly. He helped develop the system that evolved into the five-line staff, which made it possible to preserve and transmit those sacred melodies across generations.
Oh, wow.
Of course, secular music still existed during this time, with minstrels, jugglers, and troubadours entertaining the nobility.
Oh.
But the focus was undoubtedly on sacred music and its power to connect people with the divine.
It sounds like a very different musical world from our own. So how did things change as we moved into the Renaissance from 1450 to 1600 AD?
Well, the Renaissance marked a period of rediscovering and reinterpreting the ideas of classical
Oh.
antiquity. This had a profound impact on music as well. We see polyphony, music with multiple independent vocal lines becoming increasingly complex, adding a whole new dimension to musical expression.
Okay, so we're moving from a single melodic line to multiple voices interweaving and creating harmonies.
Right.
That must have been a pretty big shift for listeners at the time, but I'm guessing they weren't blasting it on their headphones.
You're right.
Hmm.
Imagine experiencing that intricate interplay of voices for the first time in a grand cathedral or a bustling marketplace. And it wasn't just about sacred music. We also see the rise of secular vocal music like madrigals and carols, often with playful and romantic themes.
It sounds like the Renaissance brought a renewed sense of joy and celebration to music.
Yeah.
And did they start to move away from just vocal music?
Yes, they did.
Okay.
Instrumental music began to flourish. We see the emergence of dance music specifically composed for instruments, like Richard Carey's Ciccona. Imagine that being the hit song at a Renaissance court.
So from the chanting monks to the dance floors of the Renaissance, it seems like music was always evolving, reflecting the changing times.
Absolutely.
And this leads us to the dawn of what we now call the classical era.
Yes, the classical era, spanning from 1600 to 1910 AD, saw an explosion of musical creativity and innovation across Europe. It's a period marked by dramatic social and political changes, and those changes are reflected in the music. The classical era was a period of dramatic shifts, and music wasn't left behind. We're talking about the birth of opera, the rise of the orchestra as we know it, and a whole new way of thinking about musical structure and expression.
Okay, opera. That's huge. But how did it come about? It seems so different from what we've talked about so far.
It actually has roots in those ancient Greek ideas we mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
In the early 1600s, a group of Florentine intellectuals was fascinated by the idea of reviving Greek drama, but with a twist.
Okay.
They wanted to use music to tell the story. Imagine a play where every word is sung, every emotion amplified by the power of music.
So it was like a musical, but way more dramatic.
Exactly. And from those discussions came what we consider the first true opera. Claudio Monteverdi's L'Orfeo premiered in 1607. It tells the tragic myth of Orpheus and Eurydice, and it set the stage for what opera would become. A grand spectacle combining music, drama, elaborate sets, and costumes.
And with opera came a whole new set of musical challenges and possibilities.
Absolutely. We see the orchestra expanding with string instruments taking center stage. The harpsichord, popular in the Renaissance, gradually gives way to the piano, allowing for greater dynamic range and expressiveness. And singers, of course, become the stars, showcasing their vocal prowess and embodying those larger-than-life operatic characters.
It sounds like the Baroque period, which ran from 1600 to 1750, was all about pushing boundaries and creating these grand dramatic experiences. But didn't this era also see the emergence of one of the most influential composers of all time?
You're talking about Johann Sebastian Bach, of course.
Yeah.
He was a master of counterpoint, a technique where multiple independent melodic lines weave together in a complex and harmonious way.
Oh.
His music is incredibly intricate, yet deeply moving, and his influence can still be heard in various genres today.
I've always been amazed by how Bach could create such intricate music, especially considering he was often writing for the church and had to meet their specific requirements. But he wasn't the only big name in the Baroque period, was he?
No, not at all. George Frideric Handel, known for his majestic oratorios like Messiah, and Antonio Vivaldi, whose Four Seasons still evokes the beauty and drama of nature, were also incredibly influential composers of this era. They each contributed to developing a distinct Baroque style that emphasized grandeur, ornamentation, and a sense of dramatic intensity.
So as the Baroque period transitioned into the classical period, which ran from about 1750 to 1800, what were some of the key changes we see in music?
Well, the classical period saw a shift towards a more balanced and restrained style. Think of it as a return to those classical ideals of clarity, symmetry, and order. Vienna becomes the center of the musical world, with composers like Joseph Haydn, Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, and Antonio Salieri leading the way.
Mozart. Now that's a name everyone knows, even if you don't listen to classical music.
Right.
His music just seems to have this timeless quality.
It does.
What do you think it is about Mozart that continues to resonate with audiences centuries later?
It's a combination of factors. His music is incredibly melodic, his harmonies are beautiful and balanced, and he had a knack for writing music that is both technically brilliant and emotionally engaging. Plus, he was a prolific composer, writing operas, symphonies, concertos, chamber music, you name it. There's a reason Mozart's music is so widely performed and loved even today.
It's like he had a gift for expressing the full range of human emotions through music. And the orchestra continued to evolve during this period, right? Yeah.
Absolutely. Johann Stamitz, a German composer and violinist, played a key role in establishing what we now consider the classical orchestra, standardizing the instrumentation and introducing dynamic markings like piano, soft, crescendo, gradually louder, and forte, loud. This allowed for greater expressiveness and a wider range of emotional nuances in the music.
So we're hearing more variation in volume and intensity, more light and shade in the music. It must have been exciting to hear these new orchestral sounds for the first time.
And we also see new string techniques emerging, like pizzicato, where the string is plucked rather than bowed, and double stops, where two strings are played simultaneously. These techniques added new textures and colors to the orchestral palette, further enriching the sonic landscape.
So from the grandeur and drama of the Baroque to the elegance and balance of the classical period, it seems like music kept reflecting the changes happening in society. And then, of course, came the Romantic era, a period often associated with heightened emotions and a sense of individualism.
That's right. The Romantic era, which spanned from roughly 1800 to 1910, saw a shift toward music that expressed a wide range of personal emotions, from joy and love to longing, despair, and even revolutionary fervor. Think of the grand symphonies of Ludwig van Beethoven, the passionate piano works of Frédéric Chopin, and the dramatic ballets of Pyotr Ilyich Tchaikovsky.
Beethoven is a fascinating figure. He's often seen as bridging the classical and romantic periods, combining that classical sense of structure with this new romantic expressiveness. Plus, there's the added drama of his struggle with deafness.
It's truly remarkable how he continued composing some of his most powerful and innovative works, even as his hearing deteriorated. Think of his iconic Ninth Symphony, with its powerful Ode to Joy. It's a testament to his unwavering spirit and the power of music to transcend even the most challenging circumstances.
It's amazing to think that some of the music we consider most passionate and emotionally charged was written by someone who was losing his hearing. And speaking of emotional depth, composers like Schubert and Brahms really tapped into that sense of introspection and longing in their music, didn't they?
They did.
Yeah.
Franz Schubert's lieder songs for voice and piano are known for their beautiful melodies and deeply personal lyrics, often reflecting themes of love, loss, and longing. Johannes Brahms, known for his symphonies and chamber music, explored a rich harmonic language and created works that are both intellectually stimulating and emotionally resonant.
It sounds like the Romantic era was a time of great emotional depth and exploration in music. But what about those new trends emerging at the end of the 19th century? Didn't we see Impressionism begin to take shape in music around this time?
You're thinking of Claude Debussy, the French composer, who is considered the pioneer of musical impressionism.
Yeah.
His music, like his paintings, aimed to evoke moods and atmospheres rather than tell literal stories. He used unique harmonies and shimmering orchestral colors to create a sense of mystery and ambiguity, often inspired by nature and dreamscapes.
Debussy's music is so evocative. It's like stepping into a painting or a hazy dream. It seems like a perfect transition point to the modern era where things start to get really experimental. It's amazing how much ground we've covered, from ancient rituals to the birth of opera and the emotional intensity of the Romantics. It feels like music constantly evolves alongside human civilization.
That's precisely what makes this exploration so fascinating. As we move into the 20th century and beyond, we see how music becomes a reflection of the rapid technological and social changes sweeping the globe.
Okay, so let's talk about the 20th century. A period of incredible upheaval and innovation. It's almost hard to know where to begin.
Perhaps the biggest game changer was the advent of electronic music. New technologies allowed composers to create sounds that had never been heard before, pushing the boundaries of what music could be. Think of instruments like the synthesizer and the theremin.
Yeah.
They opened up a whole new world of sonic possibilities.
I can imagine how mind-blowing it must have been to hear those early electronic instruments for the first time. It must have sounded like something from another planet.
It was a radical departure from traditional acoustic instruments. And this new technology also had a huge impact on how music was recorded and disseminated. The invention of the phonograph and later the vinyl record meant that music could be captured, reproduced, and shared on a massive scale.
So we're not just talking about new sounds, but also a new way of experiencing music. Suddenly, you could listen to your favorite artists anytime you wanted, not just when they were performing live.
Exactly. This accessibility also helped fuel the rise of new genres, like jazz and blues, which originated in the African American community in the United States. These genres, rooted in improvisation and soulful expression, quickly gained global popularity and influenced countless other musical styles.
Jazz, with its syncopated rhythms, improvisational solos, and complex harmonies, seems to have this incredible energy and spontaneity. It must have felt so different from the structured music of the classical and Romantic eras.
It was a breath of fresh air, a rebellion against the formality of European classical music. Blues, on the other hand, with its raw emotion and often melancholic lyrics, tapped into something deeply personal and universal. Both genres spoke to the experiences and struggles of people who had often been marginalized, and their impact on popular music is immeasurable.
And then, of course, came rock and roll in the mid-20th century, a true cultural phenomenon. It's hard to imagine a world without it now.
Rock and roll was a seismic shift. It brought together elements of blues, country, and gospel, amplified them with the electric guitar, and added a driving beat that was impossible to ignore. It was music that spoke to youth rebellion energy and a desire to break free from convention.
It's almost impossible to overstate the impact rock and roll had on society. It wasn't just music, it was a whole cultural movement that influenced fashion language and attitudes toward authority.
And just as rock and roll was shaking things up, technology kept advancing, leading to yet another musical revolution, the digital revolution.
The emergence of digital sound and computer-based music production in the late 20th century must have felt like stepping into the future.
It was a game changer. Suddenly, anyone with a computer and some basic software could create and share their own music. It democratized music production and led to an explosion of new genres and subgenres, from electronic dance music, EDM, to hip-hop, to countless experimental forms.
It's mind-boggling to think how far we've come from those early acoustic instruments to a world where music can be created entirely on a computer. It seems like the possibilities are endless.
And the internet has played a huge role in this as well. It's broken down geographical barriers, allowing us to access music from all over the world with just a few clicks. It's created a truly globalized music culture where different styles and influences are constantly interacting and evolving.
So in a way, we've come full circle. We started with music as a communal experience, often tied to rituals and ceremonies. And now with the internet and digital technology, we're back to a world where music connects us globally across cultures and continents.
It's fascinating to see how these ancient impulses toward connection and expression continue to drive musical innovation. Even amidst all the technological advancements, music remains a deeply human art form.
But what about those composers who weren't necessarily embracing the latest technology? Didn't we also see a renewed interest in exploring and reinterpreting older musical styles in the 20th century?
Absolutely. Alongside the rise of electronic music and digital production, we also saw composers revisiting and reinterpreting classical forms. Some incorporated elements of Baroque or Romantic music into their contemporary works, creating a dialogue between the past and the present.
It's like they were acknowledging the lineage of music, showing how the music of previous eras continues to inspire and influence the present.
Precisely. And alongside this reinterpretation of older forms, we also saw a surge in nationalistic movements in music, with composers drawing inspiration from the folk traditions of their own cultures.
Think of composers like Bela Bartok, who incorporated Hungarian folk melodies and rhythms into his compositions, creating a unique and powerful musical language. Or Isaac Albanese, whose evocative piano suites captured the spirit of different regions of Spain.
These composers sought to preserve and celebrate their cultural heritage through music. They showed how music could be a powerful force for expressing national identity and pride.
So we've journeyed from the dawn of music to the digital age, witnessing its incredible evolution. It's clear that music has always been a mirror reflecting our cultural, social, and technological changes. But what does this all mean for the future of music? Where do we go from here?
That's the big question, isn't it? As technology continues to evolve at an unprecedented pace, it's exciting to imagine what new sonic landscapes might emerge. We're already seeing artificial intelligence and virtual reality being used in music creation and performance, opening up even more possibilities.
It's mind-boggling to think that we might have AI composers creating symphonies or algorithms generating personalized soundtracks for our lives. What does it mean to be a musician in the 21st century when machines can create music too?
It raises all sorts of fascinating questions about creativity, authenticity, and the role of technology in art. But one thing's for sure, music will continue to evolve, reflecting our hopes, fears, and dreams. It will continue to connect us, challenge us, and move us in ways we can't yet imagine.
It's an exciting time to be a music lover. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final thought. What does the music of today say about us? What stories are we telling through our sounds? What trends do you see shaping the future of music?
Keep your ears open and stay curious, because the next chapter in the history of music is being written right now, and you are a part of it.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of music.